Hey, so, tonight I want to share something personal. Something I've carried for so long that it's become part of who I am, like a second skin I never asked for. This is about the night I came out to my family, the family that prayed together every Sunday, that believed love had conditions, that thought they knew exactly who I was supposed to be. It started like any normal week, but it didn't end that way. If this kind of storytelling speaks to you, feel free to like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your thoughts or your own story. Now, dial the lights, or put on your headphones, and let's begin. I ram you up in a house where the Bible sat on the coffee table like a centerpiece, where Ramis was said before every meal, where my mother's voice echoed through the hallways reciting verses she'd memorized as a child. Sunday mornings meant ironed clothes, polished shoes, and an hour and a half in the third pew from the front. I knew every hymn by heart. I knew which parts of the sermon would make my father nod in arraignment, which phrases would make my mother dab at her eyes with a tissue. But I also knew something else. Something I'd known since I was 13, maybe earlier. I knew I was different. I knew the way I felt when I looked at certain people wasn't the way I was supposed to feel. I knew the prayers I whispered into my pillow at night, begging God to change me, to fix me, to make me normal, were going unanswered. Or maybe they were answered, just not in the way I wanted. Maybe the answer was that there was nothing to fix. I spent years trying to be the child my parents wanted. I dated people I wasn't interested in. I forced smiles during conversations about marriage and children and the future God had planned for me. I memorized the right responses, the right tone of voice, the right way to deflect when someone asked too many questions. I became an expert at hiding. The weight of it was suffocating. Every Sunday, I sat in that church pew and listened to sermons about sin and redemption, about straying from the path and finding your way back. I heard the whispers about families who'd been torn apart, about children who'd chosen darkness over light. I saw the way people looked at those who were different, the way their voices dropped to a hush, the way they shook their heads in pity or disgust. I remember one particular Sunday when I was 17. The pastor told a story about a young man who'd turned away from God, who'd given in to temptation and lost everything. He didn't say the words explicitly, but everyone knew what he meant. I felt my mother's hand reach over and squeeze mine, a gesture of comfort, of solidarity. She thought we were on the same side. She had no idea I was the enemy in her story. That night, I locked myself in my room and cried until my chest ached. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to see what my parents saw, what the church saw. I tried to find the sin, the corruption, the darkness that everyone seemed so afraid of. All I saw was a scared kid who just wanted to be loved for who they actually were. The years passed, and the secret grew heavier. I went to college, thinking distance might give me clarity, might give me freedom, but I came home every holiday, every summer, and slipped back into the role I'd perfected. I laughed at my father's jokes about those people. I nodded along when my mother talked about the sanctity of traditional values. I stayed silent when my younger siblings repeated the things they'd heard in youth roundup about what was right and what was wrong. I started therapy during my sophomore year. My therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes and a voice that never judged, asked me why I was so afraid. I told her about my family, about the church, about the sermons and the whispers and the verses that had been drilled into my head since childhood. She asked me what I thought would happen if I told them the truth. I couldn't answer. The possibilities were too terrifying to put into words, but she planted a seed that day. She asked me a question that I couldn't stop thinking about. Whose life are you living? I carried that question with me for months. I thought about it during family dinners, during phone calls with my mother, during Sunday morning church services when I was home for Christmas. Whose life was I living? Because it certainly didn't feel like mine. I was 23 when I finally decided I couldn't keep living like this. I'd graduated college, started a job, Found a small apartment in a city 2 hours away from home. I had space, finally, to breathe, to be myself when no one was watching. I made friends who knew the truth, who accepted me without question. I started dating someone who made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. But every tie-in, my phone rang with my mother's number. Every tie-in, I drove home for a visit. I felt the mask slide back into place. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller, quieter, less alive. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep splitting myself in two. The decision wasn't sudden. It wasn't a lightning bolt moment of clarity. It was a slow, steady build, like water filling a glass drop by drop until it finally overflows. I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't keep hoping things would change on their own. I couldn't keep hiding. I called my therapist and told her I was ready. She asked me if I had a plan, if I'd thought about what I would say, how I would say it. I hadn't. I just knew I needed to do it before I lost my nerve. She suggested I write it down first, practice saying the words out loud, prepare myself for different reactions. I thanked her and hung up. But I didn't write anything down. I was afraid that if I planned too much, I'd talk myself out of it. Instead, I called my mother. My hands were shaking as I held the phone to my ear, listening to it ring once, twice, 3 times. When she answered, her voice was bright, cheerful, the way it always was when I called. She asked about work, about my apartment, about whether I was eating enough. I gave her the answers she wanted to hear, let her fill the silence with updates about my siblings, about church, about the neighbor's new puppy. And then I said the words I'd been rehearsing in my head for years. Mom, I need to talk to you and Dad about something important. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the shift in her breathing, the way her voice changed when she asked, "Is everything okay?" I told her everything was fine, that I just needed to talk to them in person. I asked if I could come home that weekend, if we could sit down together, just the 3 of us. She aramied, but I could hear the worry in her voice, the questions she didn't ask. I told her I loved her, and ended the call before I could change my mind. The days leading up to that weekend felt like an eternity. I barely slept. I played out 1,000 different scenarios in my head, imagined every possible reaction, every possible outcome. I told myself that no matter what happened, I would be okay. I told myself that living my truth was worth the risk. I told myself that the people who truly loved me would find a way to accept me. But deep down, I was terrified. Because I knew my family. I knew what they believed, what they'd been taught, what they'd spent their entire lives defending. And I didn't know if love would be enough to bridge that gap. The drive home that Friday felt longer than usual. Every mile brought me closer to a moment I couldn't take back, a truth I couldn't untell. I rammed the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I'd made this drive hundreds of tiennes before, knew every exit, every landmark, every stretch of road where the radio signal would fade in and out. But this tienne was different. This tie-in. I was driving towards something that would change everything. I arrived just before dinner. My mother met me at the door with a hug that lasted a beat too long, her hands lingering on my shoulders as she searched my face for clues. "You look tired," she said, and I nodded. Let her believe it was just work stress, just life in the city wearing me down. My father was in the living room, watching the evening news, and he stood when I walked in, gave me the same firm handshake he'd been giving me since I was a teenager. We ate dinner together, the 3 of us around the same table where I'd Ramon up. My younger siblings were away at college, visiting friends, living their own lives. It was just us, the way it used to be before everything got so complicated. My mother had made my favorite meal, the one she always made when I came home, and I forced myself to eat even though my stomach was in knots. They made small talk, asked about my job, about my apartment, about whether I was going to church in the city. I gave vague answers, half-truths, the same evasions I'd been using for years, but I could feel the conversation building toward something, could feel the weight of the unsaid pressing down on all of us. Finally, my father set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Your mother said you needed to talk to us about something important." I took a breath. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, could hear the blood rushing in my ears. For a second, I thought about backing out, about making up some story about needing financial advice or career guidance. But I looked at my parents sitting across from me, at the people who'd raised me and loved me and taught me everything they knew about the world, and I realized I owed them the truth. I owed myself the truth. "I need to tell you something," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "And I need you to listen, really listen, before you say anything." My mother's face went pale. My father's expression hardened, the way it always did when he was bracing himself for bad news. I could see them both running through possibilities in their minds, trying to figure out what could possibly be so serious that I'd driven 2 hours to tell them in person. I took another breath, and then I said it. The words I'd been holding back for so long, the truth I'd been too afraid to speak out loud. Imge. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched out between us like a chasm, wide and dark and impossible to cross. I watched my mother's face crumple, watched her hand fly to her mouth as if she could push the words back in, undo what I'd just said. My father's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold in a way I'd never seen before. "No," my mother said finally, her voice breaking. "No, that can't be true." I wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand, to tell her it was okay, that I was still me, that nothing had really changed except that now she knew. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in my chair, watching my family fall apart in real time. My father spoke next, his voice low and controlled. "This is a choice," he said. "A choice you're making to turn away from everything we've taught you, everything we believe in." I shook my head. "It's not a choice. I didn't choose this any more than I chose the color of my eyes or the sound of my voice. This is who I am. This is who I've always been." "Don't," my mother said sharply, and I'd never heard that tone from her before. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare try to justify this with something you can't control. You have free will. You have a choice. And you're choosing to. She couldn't finish the sentence. She was crying now, openly, her shoulders shaking. My father put his arm around her, pulled her close, and looked at me with something that might have been anger, or might have been disgust, or might have been both. "We raised you better than this," he said. "We took you to church every Sunday. We taught you right from wrong. We showed you what a godly life looks like. And this is how you repay us?" The words hit me like physical blows. I'd known this would be hard. Had prepared myself for rejection, for tears, for anger. But hearing my father reduce my entire existence to an act of rebellion, to some kind of moral failing, was worse than anything I'd imagined. "This isn't about you," I said, and my voice was shaking now. "This isn't something I'm doing to hurt you or defy you. This is about me finally being honest about who I am." "Honest?" My mother laughed, a bitter sound that didn't match her face. "You've been lying to us for years, apparently. How long have you known? How long have you been living this lifestyle behind our backs?" I wanted to tell her that it wasn't a lifestyle, that it was just my life. I wanted to explain that I'd been trying to protect them, trying to protect myself, trying to find a way to reconcile the person I was with the person they wanted me to be. But the words wouldn't come. I sat there, silent, while my parents looked at me like I was a stranger. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," he said, and walked out of the room. My mother followed Hyan, leaving me sitting alone at the table, surrounded by half-eaten plates of food and the wreckage of our family dinner. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe, or hours. Tien felt strange, elastic, like it was moving too fast and too slow all at once. I could hear my parents talking in the other room, their voices rising and falling, my mother crying, my father's steady, measured tone trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense to Hien. Eventually, I stood up and cleared the table, an automatic gesture born from years of habit. I washed the dishes in silence, let the warm water run over my hands, focused on the xianplei, mechanical task of scrubbing plates clean. It was easier than thinking about what had just happened, easier than processing the look on my mother's face or the coldness in my father's eyes. When I finished, I found them in the living room. My mother was sitting on the couch, her face red and puffy from crying. My father was standing by the window, staring out at the darkening street. They both looked older than they had an hour ago, worn down by the weight of this revelation. "We need to pray about this," my mother said finally. "We need to ask God for guidance." I wanted to tell her that I'd been praying for years, that I'd begged God to change me, to fix me, to make this easier. I wanted to tell her that maybe, just maybe, God was fine with who I was, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I knew that in their minds, this was a battle between good and evil, between righteousness and sin, and I'd just declared myself the enemy. "I think I should go," I said quietly. "Give you some Tien to process this." My father turned from the window. "No," he said. "You're not leaving. Not like this." I didn't know what he meant by like this, but I also didn't have the energy to argue. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, running on empty. All I wanted was to curl up in my childhood bed and pretend this night had never happened. My mother stood up, wiped her eyes, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "We love you," she said. And the words should have been a comfort, but they felt like a weapon. "We love you. And that's why we can't support this. We can't watch you destroy your life, throw away your soul, choose damnation over salvation." I felt something break inside me then. Some fragile hope I'd been holding on to. Some belief that love might be enough to overcome the fear and the doctrine and the years of conditioning. Because that's what this was, really. Conditional love. Love with strings attached. Love that could be withdrawn the moment I stopped being who they wanted me to be. "I'm not choosing damnation," I said, and my voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm choosing honesty. I'm choosing to live as myself instead of pretending to be someone I'm not." "Then you're choosing to turn your back on God," my father said. And on this family, the finality in his voice was terrifying. I looked at Hien, at this man who'd taught me to ride a bike, and helped me with my homework and told me he was proud of me when I graduated college. I looked at my mother, who'd braided my hair and kissed my scraped knees and stayed up late helping me study for tests. And I realized that they were looking at me like I was already gone. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. I'd stared at 1,000 Tiens before. The glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there when I was 10 were still there, faded but visible. I remembered being that kid, the one who thought the world was xianplei, who believed that if you followed the rules and did what you were told, everything would turn out okay. I wondered what that kid would think of me now. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock on my door. I didn't answer, didn't move, hoped whoever it was would go away. But the door opened anyway, and my mother slipped inside, closing it quietly behind her. She sat on the edge of my bed, the way she used to when I was sick or scared or couldn't sleep. I could feel the mattress dip under her weight, could smell her familiar perfume, the one shed worn for as long as I could remember. "I can't sleep either," she said softly. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't know what to say, didn't know if there was anything left to say that wouldn't make things worse. But my mother had never been comfortable with silence, and eventually she spoke again. "When you were born," she said, "I made a promise to God. I promised I would raise you right, teach you His word, guide you on the path to salvation. And I thought I did everything right. I thought I was a good mother. You are a good mother, I said, because it was true. Because despite everything, despite the pain and the rejection and the disappointment, she had been a good mother in so many ways. Then where did I go wrong? Her voice cracked. What did I miss? What sign did I not see? I sat up, turned to face her in the darkness. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you. This isn't because you failed or because I'm broken. This is just who I am. But that's what I don't understand, she said, and I could hear the genuine confusion in her voice. How can you be this way? How can you choose to go against everything God created you to be? I'm not going against anything, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. I'm finally being honest about who God created me to be. Don't you think He knew? Don't you think He made me exactly as I am? For a reason? My mother shook her head. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't create people to sin. Then maybe it's not a sin, I said. Maybe the interpretation is wrong. Maybe the translations got confused somewhere along the way. Maybe, don't. She cut me off. Don't try to twist scripture to justify this. The word of God is clear. Is it? I asked. Because I've read those passages too. I've studied them. I've researched the original Greek and Hebrew. And you know what I found? Context, nuance, verses that were talking about temple prostitution and pederasty, not loving, consensual relationships between adults. My mother stood up abruptly. I didn't come in here to debate theology with you. I came because you're my child, and am scared for you. I'm terrified that you're throwing away your eternal soul for temporary pleasure. This isn't about pleasure, I said, standing too. This is about love. About wanting to share my life with someone I actually care about. Someone who sees me for who I really am. Isn't that what you wanted for me? Isn't that what you've been praying for since I was born? Not like this, she whispered. Never like this. She left then, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I sank back onto my bed, pulled my knees to my chest, and let myself cry for the first time since Eid gotten home. I cried for the family I was losing, for the relationship that would never be the same, for the little kid with the glow in the dark stars who'd thought love was simple and unconditional. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. There was a note on the kitchen table in my mother's handwriting. Gone to church. Leftovers in the fridge. No mention of last night. No indication that anything had changed. Just a normal Saturday morning note, as if I hadn't just blown our entire family apart. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, trying to figure out my next move. I could pack up and leave, drive back to the city and pretend this weekend had never happened. I could wait for them to come home, try to continue the conversation, see if there was any way to salvage this. Or I could do what I'd been doing my entire life. Pretend everything was fine, slip back into the role they wanted me to play. Hope that eventually they'd forget this ever happened. But I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of living half a life. Id finally told the truth. And even though it hurt, even though it was destroying everything Id known, there was also something freeing about it. Id spent so many years afraid of this moment, and now that it was here, Id survived it. I was still breathing. I was still myself. I was packing my bag when they came home. I heard the car pull into the driveway, heard the sound of car doors closing, heard their voices as they walked up to the house. I braced myself for another confrontation, another tearful conversation, another round of prayers and scripture verses and pleas to see reason. But when they walked into the house, they barely looked at me. My father went straight to his study. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, putting away the casserole dish someone had given her after church, wiping down counters that were already clean. I'm going to head back to the city, I said, breaking the silence. My mother stopped what she was doing but didn't turn around. So soon? I think it's best, I said. Give everyone some space. She nodded, still not looking at me. Drive safe. That was it. No hug, no I love you, no acknowledgement of what had happened the night before. Just drive safe. As if I was heading back after a normal weekend visit, as if everything was fine. I carried my bag to my car, loaded it into the trunk, took one last look at the house I'd Ramon up in. It looked the same as always. Neat lawn, American flag hanging from the porch, my mother's flower garden blooming along the walkway. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Maybe it never had been. Not really. Maybe home was something I'd have to build for myself, somewhere far away from here. I was about to get in my car when my father came out of the house. He walked up to me, hands in his pockets, that same unreadable expression on his face. Your mother is devastated, he said. You need to know that. I know, I said. I'm sorry. Are you? He asked. Are you really? Because if you were sorry, you'd do something about it. You'd get help. You'd fight this instead of giving into it. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My mother called once, 3 days after I'd left. I saw her name on my phone screen and my heart leaped, hopeful despite everything. I answered on the second ring. Aye, Mom. There was a pause, and then, I wanted to let you know that we're praying for you. The whole church is praying for you. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. Of course, Shed told the church, told everyone in our small community, shared my truth with people who would look at me with pity or disgust, or that particular kind of concerned sadness that felt worse than outright hatred. Mom, I didn't want the whole church knowing about this. They care about you, she said. They want to see you saved. I don't need to be saved, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not in danger. I'm not lost. I'm just gay. She made a sound that might have been a sob or might have been frustration. Don't say that word. Please don't say that word. Why not? It's what I am. It's not what you are, she insisted. It's what you're choosing to do. There's a difference. We went in circles like that for 20 minutes. Her telling me I was choosing sin. Me trying to explain that it wasn't a choice. Her quoting scripture. Me trying to provide context. Her crying, me crying. Both of us unable to bridge the gap between us. Finally, she said, I have to go, but I want you to know that we love you. We'll always love you. But we can't support this. We can't be part of your life if you're going to continue down this path. So that's it? I asked. Choose between being myself and having a family? You're choosing to abandon your family, she said. Not the other way around. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the blank screen, trying to process what had just happened. My mother, the woman who'd kissed my scraped knees and braided my hair and taught me to bake cookies, had just told me that loving who I loved meant losing everyone I'd ever known. The silence that followed was oppressive. No calls, no texts, no emails. My siblings didn't reach out. My extended family stayed quiet. It was as if I'd been erased from their lives, edited out of the family narrative like a problematic plot point. I threw myself into work, stayed late at the office, took on extra projects, anything to avoid coming home to an empty apartment with too much tie-in to think. My friends tried to reach out, tried to get me to talk about what had happened, but I couldn't find the words. How do you explain that your family chose religion over you? How do you articulate the specific kind of Ramif that comes from being rejected by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? I started going to a support Ramup for LGBTQ+ people with religious trauma. I sat in a circle of folding chairs in a community center basement and listened to other people's stories. Stories that echoed my own in painful ways. Stories about parents who'd kicked them out, siblings who'd stopped speaking to them, churches that had publicly condemned them. There was something oddly comforting about it. Knowing I wasn't alone, that other people had survived this and built lives on the other side of it. But it also made me angry that this was so common, that so many families prioritized doctrine over their children, that love was treated as something that needed to be earned rather than freely given. I met someone at that support Ramup. Their name was Jordan, and they had eyes that crinkled when they smiled and a laugh that made me forget, just for a moment, how much everything hurt. We started talking after meetings, ramabbing coffee, sharing our stories in bits and pieces. Jordan's family had disowned them 5 years ago. They'd been kicked out at 18, had bounced around between friends' couches and cheap apartments, had worked 3 jobs to put themselves through community college. But they'd made it. They'd survived. And they'd built a chosen family. People who loved them not despite who they were, but because of it. It gets easier, Jordan told me one night over pizza. Not better, exactly. The hurt doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it differently. You learn that their rejection says more about them than it does about you. I wanted to believe them. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something irreplaceable, something I'd never get back. My birthday came and went without a word from my family. No card, no phone call, not even a text. I'd never not heard from them on my birthday, not in 24 years. I spent the day crying, then feeling pathetic for crying, then crying more because I was allowed to relieve this loss, even if it was self-inflicted. Jordan showed up at my apartment that night with a cake and a Ramup of people I'd met through the support Ramup. They sang happy birthday off-key and lit candles and told me to make a wish. I closed my eyes and wished for the strength to keep going, to build a life that felt worth living even without my family in it. You're part of our family now, one of them said, whether you like it or not. And the strange thing was, I did like it. These people, who'd only known me for a few months, who had their own trauma and their own pain, had shown up for me in a way my blood family hadn't. They saw me fully, knew the truth about who I was, and loved me anyway. But at night, alone in my apartment, I still missed my parents. I missed my mother's voice, my father's steady presence, the familiar rhythms of home. I missed Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, and the feeling of belonging to something bigger than myself. I missed the people they used to be, before they knew, when I could pretend everything was okay. I started therapy again. My therapist, the same woman who'd helped me find the courage to come out, listened as I processed the fallout. She didn't try to minionize the pain or rush me through the ramif. She just sat with me in it. Let me feel everything I needed to feel. You did the right thing, she said. You chose authenticity over comfort. That takes courage. It doesn't feel courageous, I said. It feels like I blew up my life for no reason. You did it so you could finally live, she reminded me. So you could stop pretending, stop hiding. That's not nothing. I knew she was right, intellectually. But emotionally, I was a mess. Some days I felt strong, proud of myself for having the guts to live honestly. Other days I re-remetted everything, wished I'd just kept my mouth shut, kept playing the part they wanted me to play. 3 months after I came out, my younger sister called. I almost didn't answer, afraid of what she might say, afraid of more rejection. But I picked up on the last ring. Hey, she said, and her voice was tentative, uncertain. Hey, I'm sorry I haven't called sooner. I didn't know what to say. I waited, let her fill the silence. Mom and Dad told us we weren't supposed to talk to you. They said you'd chosen your path and we needed to respect that by giving you space to realize your mistake. My heart sank. So it wasn't just my parents. It was all of them. A unified decision to cut me out. But I don't think you made a mistake, she continued, and I felt something loosen in my chest. I think you were brave, and I think Mom and Dad are wrong. I started crying then, couldn't help it. Really, she said. I don't understand everything. and am still figuring out how I feel about all of this. But you're my sibling, and I love you. And I don't think that should be conditional. We talked for 2 hours that night. She asked questions, some of them awkward, some of them painful, but all of them genuine. She wanted to understand. She wanted to know me as I actually was, not as Shed assumed I was. I can't tell Mom and Dad I called you, she said finally. They'd lose it, but I'm not cutting you out of my life. I won't do that. It wasn't everything. It wasn't my parents accepting me or the church apologizing or my entire family welcoming me back with open arms. But it was something. It was one person choosing me, choosing love over fear, choosing relationship over doctrine. 2 years have passed since that night at my parents' dinner table. 2 years since I drove away from my childhood home with tears streaming down my face and a future that felt impossibly uncertain. 2 years since I learned that honesty comes with a cost, but silence costs even more. My relationship with my parents hasn't healed. We're not estranged, exactly, but we're not close either. We exist in this strange liminal space where we're technically still family but don't really know each other anymore. My mother sends occasional texts, usually Bible verses or links to articles about people who've overcome their sexuality. I usually don't respond. My father doesn't reach out at all. I went home for Christmas last year, the first time I'd been back since coming out. My sister had begged me to come, said she missed me, said the family wasn't complete without me. I aramied, against my better judgment, and spent 3 days walking on eggshells while my parents pretended everything was normal, while simultaneously treating me like a stranger. No one asked about my life. No one asked if I was dating anyone. No one acknowledged the elephant in the room. We sang carols and opened presents and ate ham dinner, and the whole tie-in I felt like I was performing in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. On Christmas night, I found my mother alone in the kitchen, washing dishes. I picked up a towel and started drying, falling into the old rhythm we'd had when I was ramoing up. I miss you, I said quietly. I miss us. Her hands stilled in the soapy water. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, I miss you too. But I miss the you that you used to be. I'm the same person, I said. I've always been this person. You just didn't know it. She shook her head. You were my baby. My good, sweet, faithful baby. And now I'm still all of those things, I interrupted. I'm still good. I'm still me. I'm just finally being honest about who that is. I don't know how to accept this, she said, and her voice broke. I don't know how to reconcile the child I raised with the person you're choosing to become. I'm not becoming someone else, I said, setting down the dish towel. I'm just finally letting you see who I've always been. She didn't respond, just went back to washing dishes. I left the kitchen, went back to my childhood bedroom, and cried into my pillow like I was 13 years old again. I haven't been back since, but here's the thing about Remif. It changes shape over time. It doesn't go away, doesn't get smaller, exactly, but you learn to carry it differently. You learn that you can love people and be hurt by them simultaneously. You learn that family doesn't always mean acceptance, and acceptance doesn't always come from family. I've built a life in the city that feels more authentically mine than anything I had before. I'm dating someone amazing, someone who knows all of me and loves all of me. I have friends who show up for me, who celebrate my wins and sit with me in my losses. Eve found a community of people who understand what it's like to be rejected for being yourself. And we've built something beautiful out of our shared pain. My sister visits Somtienes. She drives up from college, stays on my couch, and we talk for hours about everything and nothing. She's the bridge between my old life and my new one, the one connection that didn't break when everything else did. I'm remateful for her in ways I can't fully articulate. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd never told them. If he'd kept playing the part, kept showing up to family dinners with a fake smile and a carefully constructed facade. Maybe I'd still have my parents. Maybe holidays wouldn't feel like navigating a minefield. Maybe I could still call my mother when I have a bad day and hear her tell me everything will be okay. But I also know I couldn't have kept living like that. I was drowning in the pretense, suffocating under the weight of all the things I couldn't say. Coming out wasn't really a choice in the end. It was survival. I went back to therapy recently, not because I'm in crisis, but because I wanted to process some of these lingering feelings. My therapist asked me if I had any re-ramets. I thought about it for a long tien. I re-ramé that it had to hurt them, I said finally. I re-ramé that their love was conditional in a way I didn't understand until it was too late. I re-ramé that I can't have both my truth and my family. But I don't re-ramé coming out. I don't re-ramet choosing myself. That's Ramoth, she said. 2 years ago, you couldn't have said that. She's right. 2 years ago, I was drowning in guilt and Ramif, and the desperate hope that my parents would change their minds. I'm still remeeving, still hoping on some level. But I've also accepted that I can't control their response. I can only control my own choices, my own life, my own happiness. I've learned that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I've learned that chosen family can be just as real as blood family. Some tiens, more so. I've learned that living honestly is worth the cost, even when the cost is high. I still have hard days. Days when I see a mother and daughter laughing together in a coffee shop and feel the loss like a physical ache. Days when I scroll past family photos on social media and wonder what mine would look like if they could accept me. Days when I question whether any of this was worth it. But then I remember what it felt like to live in hiding, to monitor every word, every gesture, every expression, to lie about who I was seeing, what I was doing, how I was really feeling, to watch other people live authentic lives while I performed a role I didn't choose. And I know I made the right choice. The only choice I could have made and still been able to look at myself in the mirror. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe my parents will eventually come around, maybe they won't. Maybe we'll find some middle ground where we can have a relationship that isn't based on me pretending to be someone I'm not. Maybe we won't. But what I do know is this. I'm living a life that's actually mine. I'm in a relationship with someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what they see. I have friends who would drop everything to be there for me. I have a community that celebrates who I am instead of trying to change me. I'm learning what it means to be proud of myself. Not proud in a boastful way, but proud in the sense of recognizing my own strength, my own resilience. I survived something that felt unsurvivable. I'm building a life out of the ruins of the one I lost. On my hardest days, I think about that scared kid who used to pray to be normal, who thought being themselves meant being unloved. And I wish I could go back and tell them, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt so much. But you're going to make it through. You're going to find people who love you for exactly who you are. You're going to build a life that feels worth living. You're going to be okay. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I'm learning that it's true. I am okay. Not in spite of coming out, but because of it. Because I chose truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance, myself over the version of me that was easier for other people to love. The road ahead is still uncertain. My relationship with my family might never heal. My mother might never call just to hear my voice. My father might never tell me he's proud of me. I might spend the rest of my life navigating holidays and family gatherings with the knowledge that I'll never fully belong there again. But I belong to myself now. And that's not nothing. That's everything. I'm learning to make peace with the fact that some people will never accept me, even people I love deeply. I'm learning that their rejection doesn't define my worth. I'm learning that the family you choose can be just as powerful as the family you're born into. Some tienes more so. I'm learning to forgive myself for all the years I spent hiding, for all the ways I betrayed myself trying to be what they wanted. I'm learning to honor the courage it took to finally tell the truth, even when the truth cost me everything. And I'm learning, slowly but surely, that being loved for who you pretend to be is infinitely lonelier than being rejected for who you actually are. I won't lie and say it doesn't still hurt. It does. Some days it hurts so much I can barely breathe. But the hurt is different now. It's the hurt of renewing something real, not the hurt of suffocating in silence. And I'll take honest pain over comfortable pretense any day. To anyone reading this who's facing a similar choice, who's weighing whether it's worth it to come out, to live their truth, to risk losing everything, I can't tell you what to do. Your situation is yours alone, and only you can know when or if you're ready. But I can tell you this: you deserve to be loved for who you actually are. You deserve to live a life that feels authentic, that feels like yours. You deserve to take up space in the world without apologizing for existing. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, if they choose their beliefs over your well-being, then that says everything about them and nothing about you. You are not too much. You are not a mistake. You are not a disappointment, or a failure, or a sin. You are a human being worthy of love and respect and dignity. And someday, whether it's from your blood family or your chosen family, you'll find people who see that, people who celebrate you instead of trying to change you. It's been 2 years since I came out to my religious family, and I still don't have all the answers. I still have moments of doubt, moments of relief, moments when I wish things could have been different, but I also have moments of profound peace, moments when I look at my life and think, this is mine. I built this. I chose this. And that's worth everything.